The Galactic Defense Academy's main auditorium resembled a massive amphitheater crossed with a quantum computer, if that quantum computer had been designed by an architect with an unhealthy obsession with crystalline structures. Holographic displays flickered through the air, casting ever-shifting shadows across the faces of hundreds of alien species gathered for the annual Kl'thorian challenge. And now announced Admiral ZX Vreek, their tendrils vibrating with barely contained disdain, we welcome our newest participants. The pause was deliberate, calculated to draw attention to the small group of humans entering the chamber. The Earth delegation. In the front row, a Havarian student made a sound that might have been a snort, if Havarians had noses. I heard they still use binary computing systems, they whispered to their neighbor, loud enough for the comment to carry. Sarah Chen, walking at the front of the human group, didn't even blink. At 22, she was the youngest human ever accepted to the academy, and she'd heard far worse in her first semester. Instead, she focused on the massive holographic display, showing the simulation statistics: 50,847 attempts, 0 successes under 50 standard cycles, 99.98% failure rate. The numbers should have been intimidating. To Sarah, they looked like a speedrunner's dream. The Kl'thorian challenge. Continued Admiral ZX Vreek represents the pinnacle of tactical simulation. Created by the legendary arch-strategist Kl'thor himself, it has humbled the greatest minds in the galaxy for 3 centuries. The shortest successful completion time stands at 52 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Achieved by the esteemed collective mind of Rigel VII. Sarah couldn't help herself. She raised her hand. The Admiral's tendrils twitched in irritation. Yes, Cadet Chen. Just to clarify, the simulation time is accelerated, right? Nobody's actually sitting here for 50 years. Laughter rippled through the audience. Not the good kind. Of course it's accelerated. Humans sneered a Deltarian cadet. Their crystalline form sparkled with condescending amusement. 1 standard hour equals 1 simulated year. Even your primitive brain should be able to grasp that concept. Sarah smiled. Not her diplomatic smile, but the one that had made her opponents in competitive gaming tournaments very, very nervous. Perfect. Thank you for the clarification. Behind her, her team exchanged knowing looks. They'd been chosen not for their traditional military prowess, but for their unique skill sets. Jin Park had held 16 world records in speed-running classic video games. Maria Rodriguez had famously found an exploit in the supposedly unhackable world government security system and then helped fix it, of course. Thomas O'Reilly had once won a chess tournament by moving only his pawns. The parameters are simple, the Admiral continued, either ignoring or missing the humans' exchange of glances. You must successfully defend the Kl'thorian home system against a Type I civilization's invasion force. You have access to Type I defensive capabilities and a fleet of standard size. The simulation ends when either the system falls, or you achieve victory. The holographic display shifted, showing a graveyard of failed attempts. Thousands of tactical approaches, each one ending in defeat. The most successful ones had merely prolonged the inevitable, turning 50-year losses into 100-year losses. Observed ZX Vreek's tendrils curled with smug satisfaction. How even the mighty collective mind of Rigel VII required over 5 decades to achieve victory. Their solution involved a complex series of temporal defense grids and quantum entanglement barriers that... Excuse me, Sarah interrupted again. When can we start? The Admiral's tendrils went rigid with shock. Several nearby students actually backed away, as if human stupidity might be contagious. You wish to begin now, without studying the historical attempts, without analyzing the quantum matrices, without calculating the temporal variables. Sarah shrugged. We've got some ideas we'd like to try. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the holographic systems and what might have been someone choking back laughter or possibly tears of second-hand embarrassment. Admiral ZX Vreek's voice dripped with artificial courtesy. Very well. The human team may proceed to Simulation Chamber 3. May Kl'thor's wisdom guide your attempts. As they walked toward the chamber, Maria leaned close to Sarah. You really think this'll work? Sarah's smile widened. Trust me, if there's one thing humans are good at, it's breaking games in ways their creators never imagined. Behind them, the assembled aliens settled in for what they assumed would be a brief and embarrassing demonstration of human inadequacy. None of them noticed that Sarah's team had already activated their neural tablets, running analyses that had nothing to do with standard tactical doctrine and everything to do with finding the simulation's exploitable code seams. The game was about to change. Literally. Simulation Chamber 3 looked like the inside of a disco ball designed by quantum physicists with too much time on their hands. Crystalline interfaces covered every surface, each facet capable of projecting a different aspect of the simulation. As Sarah and her team took their positions, the room hummed to life, reality dissolving into the vast expanse of the Kl'thorian home system. Neural Interfaces Online, Jin announced, his fingers dancing through holographic control surfaces. Man, their UI is terrible. It's like they've never heard of user experience design. Maria snorted. Found the first problem. They're running everything through a quaternary processing matrix. Talk about overthinking it. Through the observation window, a panel of alien instructors watched with the kind of attention usually reserved for particularly amusing train wrecks. Professor Thak, a gaseous being contained within an environmental suit, was already taking notes on what would surely be a spectacular failure. Initiating simulation in 3, 2, 1. The computerized voice had that particular tone of artificial pleasantness that somehow managed to sound condescending in any language. The holographic environment exploded into full detail around them. 8 planets, 3 artificial ring worlds, and countless defense platforms materialized in perfect detail. In the distance, the approaching fleet of the Type I civilization loomed, a force so vast it darkened the space between stars. Holy shit, Thomas whispered, his eyes wide. That's a lot of ships. Sarah was already scanning through the defense system specifications. Okay, something's weird here. Look at how they've structured the command protocols. The alien instructors murmured among themselves as the humans huddled around their tactical displays instead of immediately deploying defenses. Traditional doctrine called for establishing temporal barriers within the first simulated hour. The humans weren't even looking at the barrier controls. Founded Maria's excitement drew everyone's attention. Look at this, they're using a standardized authentication protocol across all defense systems, the same one they use for the Academy's training simulations. Sarah's grin turned predatory. The same one you cracked last week. The very same. They never considered someone might attack the authentication layer itself. Classic alien thinking, always assuming the enemy will play by the rules. Through the window, Professor Thak's gaseous form swirled with confusion as the humans continued to ignore the approaching armada. Several other instructors were consulting their data tablets, trying to understand what strategy the humans could possibly be attempting. Jin, Sarah called out, remember that speedrunning trick you found in Stellar Conquest VII? The one where you could trick the AI into targeting its own units. Jin's eyes lit up. The fleet command spoof? You think that'll work here? They're using the same basic targeting algorithms. These simulations are modeled on actual military systems. They never change them because no one ever thought to exploit them. Thomas was already running calculations. If we can redirect even a small percentage of their fleet's firepower back on themselves. We're not going to redirect a small percentage, Sarah declared, her fingers flying over the holographic controls. We're going to redirect all of it. The alien observers watched in mounting horror as the humans systematically dismantled security protocols that had been considered unbreakable. Rather than engage with the simulation's intended mechanics, they were somehow burrowing into its underlying systems. Authentication bypass ready, Maria reported. Fleet command spoofing algorithms, Prime Jin added. Targeting solutions, calculated, Thomas confirmed. Sarah took a deep breath, savoring the moment. Through the window, she could see Admiral ZX Vreek had joined the observers, their tendrils writhing in what might have been concern. You know, Sarah said to her team, I bet no one ever solved this because they were trying to win the battle. But we're not going to win the battle. We're going to break the game, her team chorused together. a phrase that had become their unofficial motto. Sarah's fingers danced across the final command sequence. Execute. The simulation erupted into chaos, but not the kind anyone expected. The massive invasion fleet, moments away from engaging the defensive lines, suddenly turned on itself. Targeting systems identified friendly ships as hostile. Command protocols reversed. Authentication systems crashed. In the observation room, Admiral ZX Vrick's tendrils went completely rigid. Professor Thak's gaseous form condensed in shock. The other instructors scrambled to understand what they were seeing. The mighty Type I civilization's armada, the unconquerable force that had stumped the greatest military minds for centuries, was destroying itself in a spectacular display of friendly fire. Time check, Sarah asked casually. 3 minutes, 42 seconds, Jin reported, barely containing his laughter. Maria was already documenting their exploit. Should we show them how we did it, or let them figure it out themselves? Oh, we'll show them, Sarah said, watching the last of the enemy fleet dissolve into virtual debris. After all, sharing knowledge is what the Academy's all about, right? The simulation's victory fanfare played, something that hadn't been heard in this chamber for over 50 years. The holographic display showed their completion time 3:42:19. Through the window, Sarah could see several alien instructors appearing to glitch like malfunctioning holograms apparently. Some species fainted when their central nervous systems encountered completely unexpected scenarios. You know what the real flaw in their thinking was? Sarah asked her team as the simulation powered down. They assumed that because they were simulating a Type I civilization, they needed a Type I solution. They never considered that sometimes the simplest hack is the most effective. The room's speakers crackled. Human team Admiral ZX Vrick's voice sounded strained. Please report to the debriefing chamber immediately. And bring your neural tablets. The Academy board has questions. As they packed up their equipment, Sarah couldn't help adding, "Hey Admiral, does this count as a speedrun record?" The only response was a sound remarkably similar to someone having an existential crisis. The debriefing chamber looked like a cross between a courtroom and a server room, with holographic displays showing their unprecedented run from every conceivable angle. Sarah and her team sat before the Academy board, surrounded by bewildered alien instructors who kept checking their data tablets as if expecting the human's completion time to suddenly add 50 years to itself. Explain, Admiral ZX Vrick demanded, all pretense of diplomacy abandoned. Sarah leaned back in her chair, a gesture that made several board members twitch. Well, it started about 15 years ago, when I first got into speedrunning. 15 years earlier Earth. 10-year-old Sarah sat cross-legged before her computer, watching in awe as a player completed impossible Galaxy VII in under 3 minutes. The commentator's voice crackled through her speakers. And there's the quantum barrier skip. By clipping through the collision detection at exactly the right angle, Speedmaster 420 bypasses the entire Andromeda section. Young Sarah's eyes widened. "Mom," she called out, "I think I know what I want to do when I grow up." Her mother poked her head in. "Become a game developer." "No," Sarah grinned. "I want to break them." Present-day Academy debriefing chamber. Speedrunning, Sarah explained to the increasingly confused alien audience, is the art of completing games as quickly as possible by any means necessary. Sometimes that means finding creative solutions. Sometimes it means exploiting bugs. And sometimes it means breaking the game entirely. Jin finished, pulling up a holographic diagram, like how the simulation's core programming uses standardized authentication protocols. Maria picked up the thread. The same protocols used across the entire Galactic Defense Network, which, by the way, you might want to update after this. The aliens' reactions ranged from horror to fascination to what might have been religious crisis among the more mathematically inclined species. But that's not how the simulation is meant to be solved. Professor Thak's gaseous form swirled agitatedly. That's exactly what the developers of Stellar Conquest VI, said, Jin countered, bringing up another display. Until I found this little exploit. 3 years earlier Earth Gaming Championship Finals. Jin's fingers flew across his controller as the announcer's voice boomed through the arena park. Has found something. Wait, those enemy ships are targeting themselves. This is unprecedented. In the player booth, Jin allowed himself a small smile. 6 months of testing, thousands of failed attempts, all leading to this moment. The crowd erupted as the game's supposedly unbeatable final boss destroyed itself with its own weapons. New world record 247.13. Present-day Academy debriefing chamber. The principle is the same. Sarah continued, bringing up the simulation's code structure. Every complex system has exploits, usually because developers never expect anyone to try certain things. Thomas projected a series of calculations, like how the targeting algorithms assume friendly fire protocols are immutable. They never considered someone might just. He made a gesture like shuffling cards, swap them around. The Academy board members were now huddled around their own displays, frantically reviewing the human's method. One of them, a crystalline being, actually developed a crack from processing the implications. But this is meant to simulate real combat. Admiral ZXVRIC's tendrils were practically tying themselves in knots. Real defense systems. Yeah, Maria nodded. That's kind of the problem. You used actual military code in a training simulation. On Earth, we call that a critical oversight. Sarah pulled up another display, this one showing their pre-run analysis. See, every other species approached this as a military challenge. They tried to outthink a Type I civilization using Type I technology, but we looked at it differently. We saw a system, Jin said. We saw code, Maria added. We saw patterns, Thomas continued. We saw a game, Sarah finished. And games can be broken. The room erupted into chaos as various alien species tried to process this fundamentally foreign approach to problem solving. Several began urgent communications with their home defense networks. Others demanded immediate access to this speedrunning concept. But Admiral ZXVRIC seemed to be struggling to form coherent thoughts. The temporal defense grids, the quantum barriers, the strategic positioning. All irrelevant if you can make the enemy fleet target itself, Sarah explained. Why spend 50 years building defenses when you can win in under 4 minutes? 3 minutes and 42 seconds, Jin corrected with professional pride. Professor Thak's environmental suit emitted a series of concerned beeps. This changes everything. The entire basis of our military doctrine. Could use some updating, Maria suggested helpfully. I've got some recommendations about those authentication protocols. Sarah watched as her team explained their methodology to the increasingly distressed alien officials. She thought back to all the tournaments, all the late-night coding sessions, all the times people had dismissed gaming as a waste of time. Oh, she added, almost as an afterthought, we also recorded our run. On Earth, it's customary to post speedrunning videos online, for educational purposes. The sound Admiral ZXVRIC made could only be described as digital panic. Don't worry, Sarah assured them, trying not to smile too broadly. We'll add a disclaimer, don't try this on actual military systems, though you might want to patch those before someone else figures it out. The Academy board called an emergency session right there in the debriefing chamber. Terms like paradigm shift and fundamental security review flew through the air. Several instructors were already modifying their curricula to include this bizarre human concept of breaking the game. As the chaos unfolded around them, Sarah's team shared knowing looks. They'd done more than just break a record, they'd broken an entire galaxy's assumptions about warfare, technology, and problem solving. So Jin asked quietly, think they'll let us try the other impossible simulations? Sarah's grin turned mischievous. You know what my favorite thing about speedrunning is? What's that? There's always a faster way. Always. The alien observers, still frantically reviewing the human's method, had no idea that Sarah was already analyzing the code of every other unbeatable scenario in the Academy's database. After all, every game was meant to be broken. Even the ones that simulated galactic warfare. The observation deck of Simulation Chamber 3 had never been so crowded. Word had spread through the Academy faster than a quantum entanglement breach, drawing students and instructors from every species. They pressed against the crystalline windows, tentacles, appendages, and sensory organs, all focused on the human team below. Beginning simulation attempt, the AI announced with its usual smug certainty. Logging attempt number 50,848. Sarah's fingers hovered over the holographic interface. Ready, team. Authentication bypass primed, Maria confirmed, her neural tablet already probing the simulation security layers. They really should have patched this after last week's training sim. Target acquisition matrices, Map Thomas reported, surrounded by floating diagrams of ship trajectories. Their entire command structure depends on obsolete checksums. Amateur hour. Stream recording started, Jin added with a grin. This is going to look great on speedrun.gov. In the observation deck, Admiral ZX Vrick's tendrils curled with anticipation. Observe closely, they instructed the gathered students. This will be a perfect example of why proper strategic doctrine requires careful temporal. Executing authentication override protocol, Alpha, Maria announced. The simulation's warning systems erupted. Red holographic alerts filled the chamber as security systems detected unauthorized access attempts. A Deltarian student's crystalline form vibrated with shock frequencies. Warning: unauthorized access detected. Security protocols engaged. Warning: unauthorized. Bypassed, Maria sang out. Their encryption might as well be ROT-13. We're in. The massive Type I invasion fleet materialized in the simulation space, thousands of ships stretching into the virtual distance. Several alien observers made noises of reverent fear. They'd seen this sight in their own failed attempts. Command protocols exposed, Thomas called out. Jin, ready for the flip. Born ready. Starting the target designation shuffle. Now. Sarah's hands danced through the holographic controls with the speed and precision of a veteran speedrunner. To the aliens watching, it looked less like military strategy and more like someone playing a particularly intense rhythm game. Warning: critical system anomaly detected. Fleet command protocols experiencing unexpected. Shut up, Sarah muttered, executing a complex series of commands that should have been impossible to input that quickly. And there. The simulation exploded into chaos. The massive invasion fleet's formation began to break apart, but not in any way the observers had seen before. Ships started targeting their own allies. Defensive systems turned offensive. Offensive systems turned inward. Impossible, shouted a Havarian instructor. The targeting matrices are quantum locked. You can't just. Watch me, Jin replied, his fingers blurring across his interface. Basic buffer overflow combined with a priority targeting spoof. Classic speedrunning tech. The holographic displays showed impossible numbers. Ship formations executing maneuvers that violated basic tactical doctrine. Security systems simultaneously registering everything as both friend and foe. They're breaking physics, someone in the observation deck screamed. Nah, Sarah called back, not taking her eyes off her work. Just breaking bad programming. Big difference. The simulation's warning systems were having what could only be described as a digital nervous breakdown. Red alerts overlapped with blue alerts, overlapped with alerts in colors some species couldn't even perceive. Warning: critical. Warning: system. Warning: unable to process. Warning. Think we broke their AI, Thomas observed casually. Good, Maria replied. Means we're winning. The invasion fleet, pride of the simulated Type I civilization, was now executing what looked like an elaborate dance choreography, if that dance was designed by a chaotic evil AI with a desire to see everything explode. Time check, Sarah called out. 2 minutes 13 seconds, Jin reported. We can do better on the next run. I spotted at least 2 places where we could optimize our inputs. In the observation deck, Admiral ZX Vrick's tendrils had tied themselves into what appeared to be a mathematical representation of existential crisis. Professor Yurthak's gaseous form had compressed to half its normal size from shock. 3, 2, 1, Sarah counted down. The last ship of the invasion fleet, caught in the cascade of broken targeting protocols, fired its main weapon directly at itself. The resulting explosion created a chain reaction through the debris field of its fallen comrades. Simulation complete. Victory achieved. Time 3:42:19. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of cooling quantum processors and what might have been several alien minds breaking simultaneously. "Well," Sarah said into the silence, "that was fun. Anyone up for trying the impossible difficulty setting?" A Regellian student actually fainted, their multiple brains unable to process the suggestion. Admiral ZX Vreek seemed to be trying to speak, but their translator just produced a series of increasingly distressed error messages. "We should probably tell them about the back door we found in the Academy's main defense grid," Maria whispered to Sarah. "Let's save something for next week's class," Sarah replied with a wink. "Always good to have a few speed strats in reserve." As the team began saving their run data, the observation deck erupted into chaos. Some species were demanding immediate curriculum changes. Others were frantically communicating with their home worlds about security updates. A few seemed to be having religious experiences about the nature of reality itself. "You know," Jin said thoughtfully, "I think we just invented a new category." Oh, Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, any % galactic defense glitchless. Except for all the glitches we just used." The simulation's victory fanfare played one final time, its triumphant notes somehow sounding slightly confused. As if even the music wasn't quite sure how to process what had just happened. The Academic Investigation Board of the Galactic Defense Academy had converted their largest lecture hall into an impromptu tribunal. Holographic displays showed the humans run from 17 different angles, each analyzed at quantum computational precision. The room buzzed with the agitated frequencies of dozens of species trying to process what they'd witnessed. "Let me ensure I understand this correctly," First Investigator ZKTL began, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns indicating severe cognitive distress. "You deliberately broke our most advanced military simulation." "Technically," Sarah replied, "we just optimized it. Breaking it would have crashed the system entirely. Though we could do that too if you'd like a demonstration." Several board members flinched visibly. "But the solution is invalid," protested Professor Yerthak, their gaseous form swirling agitatedly in their containment suit. "The simulation was designed to test strategic thinking over decades of warfare." "And we thought strategically," Maria countered, pulling up their code analysis. "We just thought differently. Look, your authentication protocols were the strategic weak point. Why waste time fighting a superior force when you can make them fight themselves?" The board members huddled around the data, their various sensory organs and appendages twitching as they processed the information. "This is unprecedented," muttered Admiral ZX Vreek. "No species has ever approached the challenge this way. We assumed the temporal investment was necessary for victory." "That's because you all think in linear time," Jin explained, bringing up a comparison display. "Speedrunners think in parallel. Why spend 50 years building defenses when you can win in 3 minutes? 3 minutes and 42 seconds, Thomas corrected automatically. A Havarian instructor's respiratory sacs inflated with indignation. But this methodology could be applied to actual military systems. Yes, Sarah nodded seriously. That's kind of the point. You might want to update your security protocols, like yesterday. The room erupted into chaos again. Several species began immediate emergency communications with their home defense networks. Others demanded access to this speedrunning knowledge base. A few seemed to be experiencing simultaneous enlightenment and existential crisis. Order First Investigator ZKTL's crystalline form pulsed with authority, indicating frequencies. We must consider the implications. The humans have not merely completed the simulation, they have exposed fundamental flaws in our approach to tactical problems. And security architecture, Maria added helpfully. Your encryption is really outdated. Admiral ZX Vreek's tendrils writhed thoughtfully. Perhaps we have been too rigid in our thinking, too bound by tradition and conventional doctrine. The humans have demonstrated an unconventional form of problem-solving, Professor Yerthak admitted, their gaseous form still slightly compressed from shock, one that could revolutionize our understanding of tactical warfare. and software development, Jin added. And network security, Maria chimed in. And temporal physics, Thomas contributed. And game design, Sarah concluded with a grin. The board members conferred in various forms of communication, some audible, some visual, some involving complex patterns of quantum entanglement. Finally, first investigator ZK Teal addressed the room. The board has reached a decision. The human team's solution, while unexpected, is deemed valid. Furthermore, we are establishing a new department at the Academy, Alternative Strategic Methodologies. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, you want us to teach it. Correct. Though perhaps with less ZK Teal's crystalline form flickered uncertainly, ... breaking of things. No promises, all four humans replied in unison. As the room began to clear, Admiral ZX Vreek approached the team. Their tendrils had mostly unknotted themselves, though a few still twitched sporadically. I must admit, your species continues to surprise us. We thought humans were centuries behind in technological development, but perhaps we were measuring the wrong metrics. That's humanity for you, Sarah shrugged. We've been speedrunning evolution since we figured out how to use sticks as tools. There is one thing that concerns me, the Admiral's tendrils curled thoughtfully. If this approach could be applied to our simulation. We already compiled a list of security recommendations, Maria interrupted, transferring a data packet. You might want to implement them quickly. We weren't the only ones watching that stream. The Admiral's tendrils went rigid. The simulation was broadcast. Don't worry, Sarah assured them. We edited out the exploitable parts. Mostly, though you might want to check your firewall settings. Just saying. As they left the lecture hall, Jin was already planning their next run. I bet we could get it under 3 minutes if we optimize the authentication bypass. First, Sarah interrupted, we need to design a curriculum that won't give the alien instructors an existential crisis. Then we can work on breaking more records. And security systems, Maria asked hopefully. And security systems, Sarah confirmed. After all, that's what humanity does best. We find problems no one else saw, solve them in ways no one expected, and thoroughly document our solution for the next speedrunner. Somewhere in the Academy's quantum servers, the simulation's AI was still trying to process what had happened. It had run for 3 centuries without ever considering that someone might simply choose not to play by its rules. It was about to learn a lot about human creativity. Very, very quickly. 6 months after the incident, as it was now officially known in Academy records, the Galactic Defense Academy's curriculum had undergone more changes than in the previous 3 centuries combined. The most popular course by far was Human Alternative Problem-Solving Methodologies, though most students just called it Breaking Reality 101. Sarah stood at the front of the packed lecture hall, watching various alien species attempt to understand the concept of sequence breaking. On the main display, a student's neural interface showed them trying to clip through a virtual wall. Remember, she called out, it's not about breaking the rules, it's about finding the rules the developers forgot to implement. In the back row, Admiral ZX Vreek sat in on the class, their tendrils now permanently twisted into what xenobiologists had termed the human-induced confusion spiral. They'd gotten used to it. Professor Chen, a Deltarian student, raised their crystalline appendage. Is it true that humans have entire competitions dedicated to finding these exploits? GDQ Sarah nodded. Global done quick, though now it's more like galactic done quick. Speaking of which, she pulled up a holographic display showing the latest speedrunning statistics. The Kl'thorian Challenges leaderboard was now dominated by times under 5 minutes. The original 50-year completion time had been relegated to a special category, classic any % no exploits. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic society, Professor Year, that had declared in a recent academic publication, might not be their technology or their military prowess, but their fundamental inability to accept that something is impossible. The Academy's security systems had been updated 17 times in the past month alone. They'd given up trying to prevent Maria from breaking in and had instead hired her as their chief security consultant. Her official title was Professional Reality Hacker. Oh, and one more announcement, Sarah addressed her class. The Academy Board has finally approved our proposal for the first intergalactic speedrunning competition, though they insist we call it alternative strategic timeline optimization in official documents. The room erupted in excited chatter, or at least, the closest approximation various species could manage with their respective communication methods. Just remember, she continued with a grin, no using actual military systems this time. Jin's last speed strat nearly caused a diplomatic incident with the Rigel Collective. It was a valid strategy Jin called from his position as assistant instructor. How was I supposed to know their defense grid was still running on the old protocols? The Academy had also established a new emergency response team specifically for dealing with the aftermath of human creative solutions. Their most common phrase was, "No, you can't do that," immediately followed by, "Wait, how did you do that?" As class dismissed, Sarah checked her neural tablet. The latest patch for the simulation had just gone live, supposedly human-proof this time. She gave it 3 days, tops. By the way, Thomas announced to the departing students, "Next week we'll be covering the basics of tool-assisted speedrunning. Please ensure your quantum processors are updated to handle paradoxes." Several students developed new color patterns that xenobiologists would later classify as anticipatory dread. As Sarah packed up her teaching materials, she couldn't help but smile. Humanity had finally found its niche in the galactic community, teaching advanced alien civilizations how to think less like advanced alien civilizations. And somewhere on Earth, a 10-year-old was watching streams of the Academy's simulations, eyes wide with possibility, asking, "I wonder if you can break that." The cycle continued, faster than ever.